Hello and welcome to the fourth lesson of my lesson series. If you've stuck around for the past 3 lessons, you know that this lesson's about advanced chord construction. You know that I've been alluding to this for quite some time, so hooray, it's finally here. And right off the bat, I just want to tell you this is definitely going to be a 2-part lesson, if not a 3-part lesson, if not just multiple lessons. I might do a 2-part lesson now and then revisit with another 2-part lesson later in the series. I haven't decided yet, but the big idea is there's a lot of information here. This is one of those years of looking at always seeing something new, really cool, really fascinating concepts that I'm going to try and chunk down those years into, 10 minutes of solid core stuff that you can really use and really grasp immediately. So what we're going to go over today, we're going to go over 7th chords. I'm going to go over where they come from and how to build them. So we get kind of the theory behind them. I'm going to go over kind of how to use them and how to play them. I'm going to show you some jazz grips because those are really kind of very useful, especially when you want to add tensions later. Jazz grips are really awesome ways to do that instead of using kind of like a standard bar chord grip or an open voicing. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the cool hooba-jooba, razzle dazzle pizzazz that comes with kind of advanced chord construction that you can do. Alright, so with that being said, let's get into today with some theory. So with triads we had 3 notes. With 7 chords we've now added a 4th note. And as the name might imply, the 4th note is a 7th. Now what is a 7th? 7th is simply the 7th degree of the scale. Or the version of the 7th that appears in the scale that you're drawing the notes from. So just like we drew the triads, we drew a major third or a minor third, depending on if there was a major third or a minor third in the scale that we were taking the notes from. We draw a major 7th or a minor 7th based on whether there's a major 7th or a minor 7th in the scale that we're using. So how do you find a 7th? Well, you can count normally, so you can count from the root note up to 7, but I like to count backwards a little bit. So a minor 7th is a whole step behind the root note. So for example, if you want the minor 7th of C, you would go back a whole step to B flat. If you want the major 7th of C, you would go back a half step to B. Now, except for the 5th, the convenient thing is every chord that was a major chord takes a major 7th, and every chord that was a minor chord takes a minor 7th. Again, the exception is the 5th chord, which because it's the dominant, takes a minor 7th even though it has a major 3rd, which gives it its dominant sound. But there'll be more on that in a little bit. But that does make it easy to kind of build these, because then you know, since again all you have to do is either go back half step or a whole step, and you know that you're kind of picking the same, again except for the 5th, you're picking the same distance as the 3rd is. That makes it kind of easy to determine them. So you get, C is C, E, G, B. To make C major 7th, to make C minor 7th, you get D, F, A, C. To make E minor 7th, you get E, G, B, D. To make F major 7th, you get F, A, C, E. To make G dominant 7th, so when you have that issue where it's a major 3rd but a minor 7th, it's called dominant. You get G, B, D, F. For A, you get A, C, E, G to get A minor 7th, and for B to get B minor 7th flat 5, you get B, D, F, A. So those are all the 7s built from the C major scale, and the same principle would work if you did it in any key. I just like using C major because it makes things usually pretty clear and easy for people. Now again, why is the dominant that way? Why is the 5th different? Well, if you tried to get the major 7th of the 5th, you would notice that it's not there. F sharp does not appear anywhere in the C major scale. F does though, so that's why the 5th gets, the G gets treated a little bit differently. So those are 7ths, those are how you build them. Why are they cool? Well, they're kind of like the first advanced chord you can build. They're very common in jazz. They also have a cool sound to them. For example, minor 7ths kind of have a diluted minor sound. So instead of being quite as harsh as a minor normally is, a minor 7th has more of like a spacey, cool sound. And same thing with a major 7th has more of kind of a cooler, smoother vibe to them. The other thing that's cool, and that gets into a little bit of that hooba-jooba razzle dazzle, is if you'll notice, by adding the 7th, you have actually added a, you could think of it in a different way, you've added a bass note to a major or minor triad. Which that's when it starts to, this is what I mean by it starts to get weird and starts to get cool and how it's a lifelong study. Now, if I look at it, let's take C major for example. C major is C, E, G, B. But wait a second. If I block out C, that's E, G, B, and that's E minor. So I also have kind of put just C on a minor third, as well as I've taken a major triad and added the 7th. I can also say I've taken a minor triad and put a C on bottom, if you're thinking for bass, but physically would look to you on top. So that's kind of some interesting stuff there. Now, why is that important? Well, it depends on how you want to think about what you're playing. You might voice a chord where it really sounds very much like a minor chord. It sounds very much like E minor, but simply has that C in the bass. And when you play it that way, that gives it a different sound and a different sounding function than if you played it more like you're really leaning towards it sounding like C major just with a B added. Always these similarities, these little patterns aren't, meaningless. You want, when you see them, and they come a lot in music, like everywhere in music, you want to try and see what does that mean you can take advantage of. Because again, with harmony, you think about harmonic function. So that means if I can get my C major chord to act like a minor triad, or I can voice it so that it acts like it's a minor triad with that C in the bass, that can be interesting. Or if I'm looking to arpeggiate something in an interesting way, if I know that that's true, I can do my arpeggiations in a kind of fascinating and cool way. And like I said, that was just for C. You can also notice that it flip-flops. So what I mean by that is that all of the major 7ths have a minor triad in them, and all of the minor 7ths have a major triad in them. Again, with the exception of the 5th, which has minor flat 5. So example, D has an F major triad in it, so that gives you kind of, again, some interesting things. So that also explains why you can do substitutions too. So again, I get a little off track here, but this is a important, cool. This is in the razzle dazzle category. That's why you can kind of, when you have a D minor, you can swap it out for a D minor 7th. You can swap it out for an F major 7th because they are somewhat similar. They have at least the triad for each other. Or I mean rather the other way around. When you have an F major 7th, you can kind of swap it out for a D minor 7th because the triads contained in the D minor 7th, the F major triads are contained in that 7th. So again, cool things to think about, cool things to look at. Alright, so that kind of does the theory of it. So the recap, we built 7ths by adding either a major or minor 7th based on whether it was a major or minor chord, except for the 5th, which gets a minor 7th even though it is a major chord. Just like with the triads, we pulled these notes from the scale that we were dealing with. So if I'm in the key of C major, I pulled the notes from the C major scale. If I was in the key of A major, I pulled them from the A major scale. And we also learned a little hoobu-joobu that you can also see major 7th or minor 7th chords as simply adding a bass note on the bottom of a chord, top physically, bottom sonically, bottom of a chord with a minor or a major triad on the bottom. So those are all fascinating things, and with all theoretical concepts, again, you should try to write out the chords on all 12 keys. You should also try and look at that and see, what does this mean? What does it mean I can do? Always try to think of all the possibilities. I'm not going to tell you everything that you can do because you're a creative person. You can probably come up with things just from me telling you that I never would have thought of. So, always try to be creative with theory and try to get it to generate something musically that you like. Alright, so now for the grips.
Sorry for the choppiness. As you can probably see, I'm no longer at my house. I recently have gone back to college, back to good old BU. So that's why it's a sudden change of scenery, and also there's a sudden pause in the video because I realized that this lesson is way too long once again. Not a big shocker since it's advanced chords, but I'm going to have to break this into 2 sections. So the second section will be the second half of this video. So that will be how to do all of the grips and different things, and I have a few additional comments. And then I'll probably shoot a video from BU now, hopefully not from my dorm room, hopefully I can get into the music room, to add a little bit more cool stuff to advanced chord construction and maybe discuss a little bit about feels. Alright, so check out the second half of the video, and I hope you enjoyed this first half. See you later.